All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the official Paris Blockchain Week podcast. Today's guest, Frederick Gregraard, CEO of Cardano Foundation. Wow. You have been the CEO of Cardano Foundation since 2020, where you lead strategic partnerships, global blockchain adoption efforts, and governance initiatives for one of the most decentralized and community-driven layer one ecosystems in the world. Your former executive at PwC, I actually worked at PwC as well, and Saxo Bank. Frederick brings institutional credibility and systems thinking to the world of decentralized infrastructure. Frederick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That was a mouthful, huh?
Yeah. Wow. There was
All
a
those
lot.
words, huh?
A lot of words. A lot of words. So, Frederick, your transition from traditional finance into leading the Cardano Foundation is a fascinating one. What drew you into the space and specifically into Cardano's mission?
Well, it was Cardano's mission who drew me into Cardano.
I love
right?
that.
So when you kind of look at it, right, I was leaving PwC because I built up the blockchain for Europe there.
Yeah.
Including we did the two first blockchain-enabled banks. We did the first integration of altcoins, as we call it back then, into a bank.
Yeah.
First licensed asset manager. We cleaned up a bank who had material risk in Bitcoin. I was part of the Libra project, remember, with Facebook and all of that. So
wow.
So we did really a lot, and we had a superhero team in PwC back then around blockchain. We were over 100 people who were nearly full-time in blockchain at that time.
Wow.
And when I then, I wanted to leave, and I actually thought I would go back into banking because I still think that the banks have strayed away from the original mission, which is to share risk with their clients and to enable, the mid-size and small companies to basically get finance and move along, to be the trusted advisor, not just the liquidity provider, not just the AML and KYC person, right? But really to be holistically part of that. So when you think about, you have an old bakery right up in Seattle, right?
Yeah.
Who's been in the generations, right?
Yeah.
When they want to, pass that on to the next generation, that's why the bank should be helpful, right?
Right.
So I actually thought I would do that.
Yeah.
But then my daughter came down in the middle of the night and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm cleaning up a bank." I said, "Why?" I said, "Well, it needs it." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Well, we gotta earn some money." And she said, "Why?" And somehow after 10 or 11 whys, I was a bit short, right?
Yeah.
Because I was like, is that really what I want to do? Can I make a bigger impact? And then one of my clients was the Cardano Foundation, and I actually thought that it was too much risk.
Yeah.
It was just too risky. And then I said, no, I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah.
And then I can tell my daughter why. It's because I actually have a chance to make society better. I have a chance to upgrade the social systems, and I have a chance, if I have a great day, I'm not only spending time with my family and my team, but somebody out in the world get economic opportunities which they wouldn't have gotten. Somebody get education, somebody get infrastructure, somebody who's not accepted in the world order, they get an opportunity to move into the world order, or at least carve out their spot. And as a banker, that's, if you're not a doctor, like a medical doctor, and you're a banker, that's actually a pretty good place to be. To use your banking skills to help people.
I love that. I love that mission. I feel like that's one of the things that's kind of missing right now from the AI narrative. I mean, AI is obviously the sexy thing right now. Everybody's talking about it. But I think the thing, when I got in the Web3 space in 2021, it was this kind of community-driven narrative that make the world a better place for everybody. And I feel like that what you're doing is very similar to that. So I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just coming off on the main stage where I did a keynote, right? And I alluded to a couple of things which is live today, right?
Yeah.
And we have a project called Landano. It's a community project, right?
Yeah.
And they've been walking around to 2,000 villages in Eastern Africa.
Wow.
And convinced the chiefs of a small village to put the real estate register on the Cardano blockchain. Because there's not a national one.
Yeah.
And what that basically happens is that due to the fact that there's no national one, they de facto created a grassroots real estate register, and we can see there is less violence now in that area, because before, if you lost everything and you saw the neighbor and chieftain, he was a little bit old,
Yeah.
The incentive of, giving him a shoulder, right, was quite big. But now we're basically, creating this immutable ledger of trust for the real estate register there, right?
I love that.
It did not come out of the Cardano Foundation. It came out of somebody who saw what we were able to do on Cardano.
Yeah.
And then they went through that.
That's amazing.
So we become the enablement of blockchain for good.
I love that. I love that. I love that. So for those new to Cardano, how would you describe the foundation's role relative to IOHK and Emergo?
So the Cardano Foundation is a Swiss non-for-profit foundation.
Yeah.
And what's traditionally seen in Swiss foundation and blockchain is that they manage the treasury, or they can even maybe mint more tokens, and they pay the original founders for work and so on. So you see them like the monetary middle of it, right?
Yeah.
And the Cardano Foundation is nothing like that. We got a grant in 2017, and the reason we are non-for-profit is because we think about how do we optimize Cardano for the next 20 years. So if you want to build a voting system in the US, you want something who works for 10, 20, 30 years.
Right.
You cannot just change that tomorrow, right?
Right.
It just won't work.
Right.
Before you have trust in it and done all the due diligence and implemented it through the federal system, etc., right?
Yeah.
So that's what we do, right?
Yeah.
We kind of instill the trust that Cardano will also be there in 10, 20 years.
I love
Emergo and IOHK is both for-profit companies, which is amazing because you need economics to move things around. And they're basically, they build important things. They do research, they do enablement, they do, bridge between TradFi and so on. They do, acceleration, right?
Yeah.
But in the end, they're for profit. So the fact that I can be allowed, even in a bear market, to think the long time axis and do the really hard stuff is one of the magical things. And the three things we do in the foundation is education and regulation. So I face off with regulators. I just came off a meeting with members of the European Parliament and policymakers talking about, the Cardano's extended UTXO model, talking about, the travel rule and all those MiCA, which is coming in. Should we have a MiCA 2 and all those things? Yeah. So in that aspect, I actually, I represent maybe even the industry. But a lot of blockchain foundations don't want to speak to regulators or stuff. They're like, we're code, we're just code, right?
Right.
And we think we have to. We cannot get cornered where we cannot operate. Yeah. The other part we do is operation resilience, disaster recovery, those kind of things in distributed networks.
I love that.
So we've been signing blocks since 2017. Yeah. And it has not been down since 2017. Yeah. And you can't find any other than Bitcoin infrastructure who can, say that. From Microsoft to Facebook to, who you name it, you won't find that, right? Yeah. And the last we do is we enable adoption. And that we don't do by paying people. We do that by inspiring, showing what's possible, libraries, you name it, whatever we can do to kind of get people to build and enjoy the values of Cardano.
I love that. I love that. So from partnering with governments to major institutions like FC Barcelona, the foundation's scope has expanded massively. What's driving that momentum?
I think passion, and then we finally have a fully fledged, fully featured, world-class blockchain. And when I say that, it's because we've been through all those development stages, right? In the start, we only had a transaction ledger, then we added native assets, then we added smart contracts, right? We need to get to decentralization, we need to get to governance, right? Yeah. But now we have the full package, and we know it works, right? And we can then now interface with big brands, like you said, with the FC Barcelona and Barcaverse. And what a lot of people don't know is that FC Barcelona is actually a decentralized soccer club. And that's why it fits so well with Cardano as well, right? Yeah. Where a lot of other soccer clubs is very centralized. There's one owner, a very rich person who owns and controls. Yeah. But Barcelona is owned by the community. And we work with the community to give them economic opportunities to keep contributing to FC Barcelona, but also to get new jobs and get new economic opportunities.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I think in the United States, I think in the National Football League, I think Green Bay Packers are a similar structure. I'm not sure, though.
Oh, maybe I should reach out there.
Yeah, you should reach out. I believe they're owned by the community, yeah. Yeah, it's the only one.
Green Bay Packers.
Green Bay Packers, I believe so.
I note that down, huh?
Yeah, you note that down. There you go. Yeah. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of this interview, from decentralization to deployment. So, global impact through partnerships. Let's talk about Cardano's collaboration with Serpo, Brazil's largest state-owned IT firm. What makes this partnership so significant for public sector blockchain adoption?
So, Serpo is basically the world's largest state-owned IT company. And already here are some people who's very native, blockchain will say, whoa, are you dancing with the devil, right? But what we're trying to get to is a situation that you can upgrade national infrastructure with something as futuristic as a permissionless blockchain secured by our community. And I think what's truly unique is that Zebra already had Ethereum developers and so on, but they're now being upgraded to the Cardano stack, and we are looking at national infrastructure, national systems to enact Cardano in there. And the other part is a lot of blockchains, they tend to do this partnership where we pay you 50 million and then you do a POC, right? This is not how this happened. This happened differently. They happened because there's people who appreciate the Cardano stack and the architecture, and they said, you know what, it would be great if we can do some Cardano. It would be good for the Brazilian state. And they reached out to us, and we help with integration and help with the legal stuff to ensure that they can actually make a real shot at upgrading Brazil's infrastructure.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So we just talked a little bit about FC Barcelona, but the Barcaverse launch with FC Barcelona shows a strong consumer-facing strategy. What's the long-term vision for Cardano and sports, culture, and entertainment?
The Cardano Foundation do not have a strategy there. So I know that there are some really large community projects and there are some really large segments of our community who has a very strong strategy there. But what you have to understand is that Cardano is now the world's largest DAO with 9 million citizens, 1.7 billion ADA, so it's about a $1 billion dollars, and we have a full tri-party government system, right? So the Cardano Foundation as such do not necessarily target sports and entertainment. However, when we see a match, and maybe Green Bay Packers is the another match, right?
I think it is.
When we see something where we can create a win-win-win situation, a win for the end consumers, a win for the company, and a win for the blockchain, right? We're game.
I love that. I love that. So let's talk about blockchain for good and ESG innovation. You work with Veritree and UNHCR. Highlights your focus on social impact. What do you think blockchain's most powerful role is in humanitarian or environmental sectors?
So, unfortunately, every time we have access to new technology, it becomes weaponized. You come with an example, I will give you the reason, right? But when you think about it, even drones, right? Killer drones, AI, right? Quantum computing, and also blockchain, right? And I do think to a certain extent that blockchain has been very weaponized, and we've seen that with some very large, rock pools and pump and dumps, and we've seen, hacks, and we've seen even some parts of DeFi. It's a little bit scary for me, right? Because what you actually replicated is like information asymmetry, right? So very few people earn a lot of money because they have, more access or more knowledge than the one who comes after, right? And what the blockchain, the Cardano Foundation is aiming to do is we're aiming to not police the blockchain, because then it cannot be a permissionless blockchain, but to show the world what can be done in terms of changing society for good. Therefore, we engage with United Nations, UNHCR, UNDP, the World Food Program, right? But we also engaged and we planted 1 million trees in Kenya, in the river delta. And we picked that very particularly because we wanted to show that NFTs could be used for other things than just pictures. We wanted to upload regulatory information, Internet of Things data, to create bespoke carbon certificates. So if you have a tree in the edge of the forest, it actually takes more carbon out of the air than one in the middle. And normally you cannot differentiate. You just have 10 kilometers of trees, right? And you calculate on that. But the fact that we can do that so bespoke on the Cardano blockchain, and we can have a centralized entity who is accepting the calculations and the Internet of Things, shows what's actually possible.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So what role does transparency on-chain play in restoring trust in ESG and social good initiatives?
There's been so much greenwashing, and everybody is, it's just about ticking a box, right? And I think what's going to happen right now is that trust is so diluted that we can no longer speak about, do you trust me or don't trust me, right? We cannot even define that anymore. So I think the new word is going to be, what's the truth? And the truth, if it's verifiable on a public permissionless blockchain where you cannot cheat and you have third-party anchors or oracles who verify that, it becomes actual. And if you have actual information, AI training becomes more dominant and you can have better models, right? You can take better decisions on tariffs, right? You can take better decisions on, has this carbon certificate been sold before? So are we doing double dipping? We have the same carbon certificate in 15 different companies, right?
I love that. I love that.
So I think what we're really struggling with right now is that there's so much data and we cannot figure out what's right or wrong. And blockchain is one of the few business models and one of the few architecture infrastructures where you can solve that problem.
Yeah.
And this is going to be what we are going to add into when we talk about social responsibility and ESG in that world.
I love that. I love that. Let's talk a little bit about scalability, interoperability, and AI. So projects like Masumi, that's an AI agent network on Cardano, point to your future-facing approach. How do you see blockchain and AI evolving together over the next 12 to 24 months?
So we see a battle space being drawn up. So there's the people who have and the people who has not. The people who have is the people who, for instance, just bought X, and they have all those tweets and all those data, right?
Right.
And they own, Google, and they own so much data. Plus, they have access to all the data on the internet, right?
Yeah.
So they have two things: they have verifiable data, at unlimited, right? And they have unverifiable data, so internet at large, right?
Yeah.
And when you think about Apple or Samsung or Google and so on, right? I mean, every email you get, every phone call, every connected device like mine here, right?
Yeah.
Plays into optimizing the user experience for you.
Yeah.
So what you're going to see is agentic AI in the future who's going to know more about you than you know about yourself. It's going to know what kind of prescriptive medicine you got 10 years ago. It's going to know what you don't even know it yourself, but when you go on Tinder, it's going to know your preference, so it doesn't even, show you the bad stuff, right? You can say, I like blondes, but in reality, you don't, right? It's going to know your most intimate secret.
Right.
And what you have to realize is there is no more databases who's not going to be hacked.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do with this is we're trying to ensure that you can have agentic AI, where it's not one AI who sits on top of that data pool, but you can actually have this medium-sized and small companies who continue being specialized in travel or medical care or whatever that is, and they hold a data footprint about you, but that's okay, as long as it's not the complete data footprint. And what the blockchain then can do is it can secure that the AI does not give anybody else the database, but give you the output of the query. So it has an identity. It's that AI. Secondly, it can prove without showing you what's in the database that this is your information and not my information. The curriculum vitae, the CV of a job, for instance, that you have the experience to do that. Thirdly, it can create an incentive model, because if you have two AI speaking together, if you have unlimited compute power, one will break the other and will get the information, right?
Right.
So by having a little bit of cost for the request, like microtransactions, so it doesn't cost a lot, right? You basically kill that type of brute force attack.
Amazing.
Thirdly, you want to have regulators and also consumers who start caring about privacy information. So creating an activity log, an immutable, verifiable activity log, right? And last but not least, even if you don't buy the end product, whether that's medical records or how you do longevity treatment or how you travel to Tokyo, right? If you don't buy the product and there's no incentive, that there is still an economic incentive for these AIs to be spun up and find each other and create a marketplace, right? So all of that is going to be anchored and secured by the trust of decentralized blockchains. So basically, instead of AIs running you'll be able to harvest the beauty of what the AI and this ultimate user experience can do. Plus, we will have thousands of companies, because thousands of companies is choice and specialization compared to one company dominating everything.
Wow.
And that's the battle space we're going up, and that's what we do with Masumi, but also other players out there. We enable the blockchain to be the security layer, that the AI doesn't go rogue and we don't end up in one offer, one who knows more about you who might potentially be hacked, right?
Yeah, I love that. So what are some of the technical upgrades or infrastructure investments that Cardano Foundation is prioritizing in 2025?
It's a lot, right? So one of the things I really want to do is I want to we just launched an identity wallet. An identity wallet which is conform with the world's most dominant identity standard, which is called the LEI, the Legal Entity Identifier. And that's actually also first level quantum secure. But the idea is that people need to understand that identity is not who you are. It's what you can verify you've done. And that means that you need to be able to host identities in a type of wallet. So we launched that, and we're very bullish on that's going to be adopted by other blockchains and other normal centralized database providers, right? And we're right now just building a use case for the GLIDE, the Global Legal Entity Identifier database, but also for large central banks, but also for our community around there.
Yeah.
So I think this identity play is going to take us to the next level. The second thing is, if you have really strong identity, you can start thinking about moving beyond algorithmic oracles.
Yeah.
Right now, there's only algorithmic oracles at large in blockchain, but you can now start thinking about, okay, so if you can prove that satellite data around a storm has been uninterrupted because it has an identity, what I just spoke about, right?
Yeah.
And you can then drag that into the blockchain. You can do reinsurance and insurance payments in the way we always was talking about, but we couldn't do because we could not trust the data feed if the bounty got too big. And now with strong identity, we can start thinking about centralized oracles from, high value data sources to disrupt and improve some of those really, really large systems like reinsurance and insurance.
Yeah.
And then you can go into structured products, you can go into all sorts of things from there, right?
Yeah.
But we're starting to dabble around with that now.
Yeah.
And on top of that, we are looking at disaster recovery and how we can get SOC 2 compliance into it. So basically you be conform with DORA and some of those standards. And in general, we just keep plowing forward.
I love that. All right, we're going to get into the fun part of the interview. Lightning round. Quick questions, quick answers. So let's do it. Token or broken? What's one thing people still don't understand about tokenized identity or public sector blockchain?
One thing only, huh?
Well, it could be two. It could be two, maybe three.
I think everything. I think
Everything.
I think
Well,
99.9%
that's the best
of
answer
people
ever.
has not understood anything about what the real value proposition is there.
Yeah, I love that. Cardano no, Cardano yes. What's a Web3 trend Cardano said no to early on, and you're glad you did it?
Meme coins.
Love it. Love that answer. Stake or mistake? What's the biggest misconception people have about staking on Cardano?
People think that staking on Cardano is like staking on Ethereum because Ethereum is slowly choosing the Cardano architecture.
Yeah.
And no, we do not have any slashing. Yes, we have liquid staking, no login. And we even have regulators who's gone back now and changed the regulatory framework.
Yeah.
That is not a banking activity to stake on Cardano, but it is on Ethereum.
Okay, I love it. Governance or guesswork? Can decentralized governance really work at scale, or are we still early?
We're still early. But the fact that we are trying creates data points, which means that if we would fail, you for the first time have data points for 9 million citizens, which will allow other people to continue that work. And we already see academics and think tanks starting to go into those data points and start refining that and giving us feedback, but also start to use that in how they steer universities, nation states, how they talk about democratic systems at large. So I think this is not about an end goal, it's about the journey.
Yeah.
And the fact that we had the guts to do that, I think this is what's going to lead us to a better world in terms of corporate governance and national state governance.
I love that answer. Foundation or fragmentation? Why do ecosystems need neutral entities like the Cardano Foundation?
I don't think you necessarily need that.
Okay.
And we are definitely not neutral. Right, but I do think what you need is people who somehow are fighting the long game.
Yeah.
If you get caught up and just do firefighting or caught up by adjusting to short-term market movements, I think you won't get a product to market fit in the long term because you keep reiterating and keep changing course. Now, that's a luxury to have.
Yeah.
Normally you don't have that in a startup environment. So I think if you find a target operating model who has something like the Cardano Foundation, who has an 8 to 9 year OPEX, and a Cardano ecosystem who has maybe a 10 to 12 year run rate at least, right? You can be more certain that you can hang around there and contribute for longer. Huh?
I love that. Galapick, if you could onboard any Fortune 500 company or government tomorrow, who would it be and why?
I would onboard India.
India,
And
wow.
the reason I would onboard India is because there's first and foremost, a huge country, has, unfathomable amount of people, right? It's still growing.
Yeah.
And they already have an official identity layer, which is not about passports or anything like that. It's just a line of strings, which we can put into the Cardano wallet, right?
Yeah.
And then we can basically enable people to manage their own different types of sub-identities towards that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would onboard India.
Okay, I love that answer. AI or L1 BFFs, will AI accelerate blockchain adoption or compete with it?
I would certainly accelerate it by far. I think actually blockchain is quite happy. It's quite lucky to have gotten this AI moment. And the AI moment is not about AI-enabled tokens. No, the AI moment is really about the people right now do not question anymore the electricity consumption and the ESGs and stuff, because then you have to do it on AI, really, right?
Yeah.
And everybody sees the value, but you're also starting to worry about where this might lead.
Yeah.
And I think blockchain is the only way forward if humanity will be able to use AI for something reasonable without being used by AI for something unreasonable.
I love that. So this is the official Paris Blockchain Week podcast. This will be launched later this year. Is this your first Paris Blockchain Week, or?
It actually is, but my team has been here they've been very supportive.
Amazing. So let's just get a few of your impressions of Paris Blockchain Week. What's been your favorite conversation or moment at Paris Blockchain Week this year?
I was at the Ministry of Finance and Economy yesterday for a 4-hour session as a part of the Digital Assets Roundtable with the European Parliament and regulators and compliance people. And the fact that we see so many diversified people who's right now going in and fighting to get a positive narrative around how we use blockchain for good, also from a regulatory policy making perspective.
Yeah,
it gives me a lot of energy.
I love that. I love that. What's one insight you think regulators, founders, or enterprise leaders should take home from this event?
You can only do so much in virtual collaboration, but when you come together and you see people's body language and you really sit together and spend time, you solve really big problems and you open your eye and your mind for the things you haven't seen. Your iris window becomes very apparent, and I haven't been able to do that virtually.
Yeah.
So finding these places like Paris Blockchain Week where the world leaders of the space comes together and we can have these discussions while also the community is there and can give us a reality check.
Yeah.
I think this is absolutely, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I agree. The energy and vibes here is magnificent. And by the way, it's in the Louvre. You're right here in the Louvre. One of the best backdrops in the world. So,
Lady Liberty was an amazing picture. Everybody wants to see Mona Lisa, right? If you go to Louvre, I say go and see Lady Liberty.
Yeah.
It's a very, very powerful moment.
Yeah, I missed that. So yeah, I have to check that out. What's a macro or tech trend you think will define the rest of 2025 for blockchain builders?
So I'm trying to say something which you did not expect, right? Not expect, really, right?
Yeah.
I think the defense industry.
Wow.
What we're seeing coming out of Ukraine right now, and what we see is being ramped up in Europe due to sort of the changing macroeconomic landscape.
Yeah.
We're going to see we're going to see blockchain being empowered into the defense industry, and we're going to see the defense industry adding cryptography and security and other things, and basically so we're going to see the defense industry going to be way more active in blockchain.
Yeah, I love that. So some final closing thoughts. You've helped lead the Cardano Foundation into the era of real-world adoption. What's your message to the community and the builders watching this unfold?
We now have a layer 0 and a layer 1, which is absolutely world-class. You can run Visa on Cardano. You can run a nation state on Cardano. You can run a university on Cardano. You can build a business with 1,000 employees on what you get out of Cardano. So let's go and do that.
I love that. And what makes this moment in Cardano's journey so unique, and how is the foundation helping shape what comes next?
I think this moment right now is quite unique because on purpose we enacted governance right now when we finally have a fully completed blockchain.
Yeah.
Now there's still some things we would like to add. You can always be a little bit faster and so on, right? But the thing is no longer about what's the next bells and whistles, and therefore we can really focus on governance.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm hearing out there right now when I go on in these meetings, right, is We really like Cardano because you wrote down a constitution. We understand how governance work. We don't get a surprise because a founder he opens his mouth one day and derails the whole ecosystem, something like that.
Yeah.
We can actually trust what's happening. Is it perfect? No, it's not. But we have a way to to iterate on that in small steps and make that better, right?
Yeah.
So I think what's really magical right now is that we're going to get stopped a little bit by all these committees and talking about governance because it's hard, right? But this is also going to be our superpower going forward.
I love that. So what is the best way for people to learn about the Cardano Foundation? And what's the best way for people to follow you and learn about all the amazing things you're talking about?
So I am it's definitely not my superpower to be on Twitter and on LinkedIn. I'm really sorry. Everybody says, Fred, can you please do more?
Yeah.
And I'm not very good at it. And no, I will not get some kind of a ghostwriter or anything like that.
I love that.
We tried that and it doesn't work, right?
Okay.
So right. I think the best way is to come to some of these events. I'm always very transparent where I'm going.
Yeah.
And hook me up, wait for me or reach out to my team.
Yeah, I saw it outside. I mean, you were taking selfies with people, talking to people. I mean, yeah.
So that's for me personally speaking, right? And other than that, if you really want to catch my attention, I'm always in for a run. I'm always in for a walk. So don't invite me out to eat. Invite me out in nature.
Wow.
And
pro tip there. Pro tip.
Yeah, and for the Cardano Foundation, I think we've been really good in updating our webpage. We have some, we have a really good Discord channel. We're really active on Twitter. We have a good community team.
Yeah.
So I think to follow what we do, go on our website and start there.
I love that. I should invite you for a run. I went up for a run this morning right around here. It's amazing.
I did as well.
Oh, really? Maybe you were there.
Yeah, well, you should have invited me. I went to the Eiffel Tower and back.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's amazing. Yeah, I didn't get that far, but yeah. It's such a gorgeous...
3 kilometers, so it's...
Yeah, it's such a gorgeous run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should definitely do that, right?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
If anybody, if I'm always trying to do a morning run or a walk or something like that, so I'm always in for that.
That is amazing. Everybody here first. This is the pro tip. Invite Frederik out for a run or a walk. I love it. Well, thank you for coming on the show. Hopefully we can do this again. Enjoy the rest of your Paris Blockchain Week. And look forward to following more of the Cardano Foundation journey, your journey. It's been absolutely delightful. So.
Yeah, and thank you to the community of builders and people who still believe in blockchain. I tell you, you will not regret it. We will win, huh?
I agree. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.